Moonlight Journey. Chris had been wandering around the market for hours. His work had become rather monotonous, and with no one to interact with, he had become bored. He handled a few ripe tomatoes before dropping them back into the box. He picked up a few carrots and let the sweet smell of pumpkin spice flow into his nostrils. The air was chilly. Each gust of wind sent a shiver down his spine. Each fleck of snow which landed on his cheek awoke him more, made him more alert to his surroundings. He only came into the market once a week. That's all he needed, as he lived alone and mainly worked from home. He was a writer. As long as he had a cup of coffee and a stack of books nearby, he had all he needed to get on with the day's routine. Then he saw her, the woman whom he had seen before. His breath caught as he watched her move smoothly, elegantly. When Chris first saw the woman, he had been shopping in the market, just as he was now. She caught his attention immediately. Her pristine white gown was like fresh parchment as she floated lightly through the crowds. She trotted into the meadow and glanced back at him, her eyes innocently shining with something like mischief. Brilliant moonlight shone amidst infinite hues of white, the clouds ruffling in messy ripples as if they were a direct copy of the woman's crystal dress. In the ever-changing art of the sky, the clouds brought infinite images of majestic beauty. When dawn arrived, it was such a casual beauty, transitory and eternal, changing and constant. The clouds were white ribbons upon the navy velvet blue, making a half spiral as it fluttered in lofty breezes. But wait, some of these were not clouds, but fog. It wrapped around Chris in the most horrific intimacy, though it would all be worth it when he found the beautiful woman once more. This fog decorated the ground, while above, the clouds decorated the vast sky with pearly white, a gift of beauty to surpass any silken or woven cloth the most talented seamstress could make. Yet now there was a moon watching over the trees and verdant meadows with the brightness of a fresh page in the winter light, the kind that brought a smile even as you let your eyes rest a moment. Chris allowed himself to imagine how the woman's beautiful golden hair would look in such illuminating light, just for a moment. It was the sort of brightness that kindled something beautiful within, and at the same time stirred a connection with the nature surrounding him. It made the soul so vibrant that it began to merge with every living thing. It was radiating, resonating, elevating, much like her pale blue eyes. The night light came as such intricately woven threads of silver, ethereal light that it was hard to look away from, hard to pull your eyes from the wonderful sight for even a moment, scared that you would miss something. If you ventured far enough from the moon, the beauty only increased. There were vast fields one could explore freely without worrying about the dangers of wild beasts. Chris imagined that she would be there, basking in the chilly winter air. In the expanse of green, there were more hues than anyone had yet named, though here they were for any eye to see. Amidst the variety of greens were flowers. The blossom opened as if each flower was a book that was more sculpted than written, the ink infusing into the petals to give them their soft glow. It was a tale of eons past, of the loving care of the soils, the rain, and the sun. A tale of the insects, the soil, the types of stories one would only find in the most whimsical children's story. The trees stood mute in the soft air, the humidity encasing every branch, every leaf. Even the nocturnal birds were somewhat heavenly. There was a subtle fragrance making its way through the meadows, a distinctive aroma of leaf and soil. The grounds of the forests were lumpy with roots. They twisted like snakes turned to stone, writhing upward one final time before descending deep into the earth to take cool drafts from the rivers below. The rivers, which wound through the canopy of trees, met the moon with such grace, as if the two of them were so enchanted by this eternal dance that nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. That's when he caught a glimpse of her once again. He saw a flash of pale gold and the flowing dress, which seemed to almost shine like the moon itself. As Chris walked through the midnight haven, following the woman's every footstep, he came upon a forest. Upon the rise of the moon, the forest was covered in a blanket of white. It had a majestic aura that begged the lost souls of those who wandered the icy woods to stop just for a moment and embrace the feeling of tranquility, which is exactly what she had done. She glanced at Chris and giggled. Before he could smile back, she was jogging further into the forest, past a huge lake. The frozen lake met the winter moonlight with such beauty, as if the two of them were so enchanted by the serenity of the cool winter day that they barely noticed the chilling air. The river appeared still, yet she flowed under the thinnest of ice, awaiting the brutally gentle touch of the sun the next morning. Though the air bared only coldness and the ground was frozen over, they glittered with the gift of each individual shining ray of silver light. It was almost as if the woman had ensured there would be hope even on the deepest and most dreary of days, asking us to see the sparks that remain even when the world around us is frozen. It was bitter cold, but somehow the rays of the moon warmed the cheeks of those who entered the forest. It was an enchanting combination. Chris was convinced the woman had something to do with the sudden warmth he felt in his stomach. Every blade of grass and every twig was frozen upwards like stubborn ice crystals, determined not to break, no matter who stepped over them. Although Chris imagined the tiny woman too dainty to do much damage to anything. A harsh, freezing fog lingered throughout the trees and over the lakes, daring anybody who trespassed on such beauty to try and vandalize it. The only sounds that could be heard were the gentle tweets of various forest creatures, preparing for easier times when they wouldn't have to flee their nests. Chris knew that, should you venture far enough into the woods, far enough that the dense canopy of trees blocked out the radiant moon, you might be lucky enough to come across a wild deer gnawing away at a stray patch of grass or trying to get to a small hole in the ice. He could only hope the mysterious lady was being careful at this hour. It was the type of place you would feel completely and utterly safe, where nothing could harm you. There was no anger or malice in the forest, just captivating beauty and frivolous happiness. Small shrubs and delicate flowers lay flat on the ground, covered in a duvet of crystal white snow, completely concealed by the power of the winter. However cold the harsh winter became, in the forest you could rest assured that no matter what you felt, the memories you had experienced in your life would flood back full force. The presence of the woman reminded Chris of the happiness he felt in his childhood. Being near her felt like a breath of fresh air. He was determined to know her. The good memories you held would seem extraordinary, and the rather terrible ones don't seem so bad after all. The forest seemed magical, a truly captivating and enchanted haven. Chris let his eyes roam to the lake in front of him. He had been walking for a few hours and was starting to grow rather tired. The lake only increased the overwhelming sense of serenity which coursed through his veins at an unruly pace. It was practically pitch black. The only source of light was the large silver circle above him, illuminating the path ahead only slightly. Despite the darkness and the occasional snap of a twig behind him, Chris found himself feeling completely and utterly safe. He felt it a duty to protect the stranger he was following. He wasn't quite sure if it was the cold air which was slowly engulfing him, encasing his fingers in a layer of ice and malice, almost like a sinister hug from a ghost. Or maybe it was the feeling of anticipation that he might come into contact with the woman. There was something so satisfying about feeling your feet push the papery remains of leaves and shrubbery into the frozen ground below, something that Chris supposed was only felt in a place such as this. Chris wandered towards the lake, hoping to catch a glimpse of where the woman had run to, feeling as if the moon was watching him, observing every single step he took, as if to protect him from whatever force was against him in the forest. The lake looked completely frozen, but he could tell that if he put even a quarter of his weight on the delicate ice, then it would snap and crack, and the water from beneath would devour him. He could see small bubbles moving below the thin layer of frozen water, as if trying to find a safe spot to breathe, as if it were trying to escape him. He felt like a polar bear hunting a seal as he stared down at the moving water before the ice and stared at the spot where the woman had run to. It was strange to feel predatory in a place as peaceful and calming as this, where the trees seemed to whisper secrets to each other, and each blade of frozen grass seemed to move differently with each gust of wind. But Chris found it hard to feel anything but evil as he carried on his journey. Each leaf he stepped on, each twig which snapped felt like a loss. He felt as if he was vandalizing the gorgeous landscape, harming the environment in which the animals lived. He stopped in his tracks as he came across a fox trotting across the space in front of him. It moved slowly as if on the prowl. Its auburn fur was perfectly illuminating by the ever-glowing orb. Its ears pricked up as Chris moved forward slightly. Its ears pricked up as Chris moved forward slightly, and they made eye contact. Chris felt as if he almost connected with the animal as they stared at each other, both analyzing the other's movements and behavior, as if they were attempting to divine their intentions. As the fox trotted away into the distance, Chris took a deep breath, and there she was, sitting on a log, her dress ruffled at the bottom, encased in a layer of ice and snow. She smiled at Chris, and he wandered over slowly, approaching her as if she were a wounded deer. "Hi," said Chris quietly, scared that if he spoke too loud, the frail woman would shatter. "My name is Amanda," she said, smiling widely. "Would you like to join me?" Chris nodded, and they spoke for hours and hours before they started wandering back through the midnight haven. Nothing in the world could have pleased Chris more than the fact that he had decided to run after her. The